The aroma of freshly ground Ethiopian yirgacheffe usually brought a moment of peace to Nia's otherwise chaotic mornings. But not today. Today, the scent was a cloying shroud, clinging to the air like a premonition. Her hands, usually deft and confident, trembled almost imperceptibly as she steamed the milk, the rhythmic hiss a counterpoint to the frantic drumbeat of her own heart. She glanced at the clock on the industrial-grade espresso machine. 7:02 a.m. He was early. From her vantage point behind the polished mahogany counter of the Velvet Grind, Nia had a panoramic view of the upscale cafe. Sunlight, usually a welcome guest, now seemed to pierce through the tall, arched windows with an accusatory glare, illuminating dust motes dancing in the silent air. The cafe was an oasis of old-world charm in the heart of the city's financial district, a place where power brokers and artists alike sought refuge in artisanal coffee and hushed conversations. But for Nia, it had become a gilded cage, especially since he had started frequenting it. Her gaze drifted to the table in the far corner, nestled beside a dark, abstract painting that seemed to absorb all light. It was his table, always, and there he was, already seated, a formidable silhouette against the muted tones of the wall. Mr. Han, or, as the hushed whispers among the staff and the city's underworld knew him, Chairman Han, the undisputed terrifying leader of the Black Serpent Syndicate, a man whose reputation preceded him like a shadow, long and chilling. Nia had served Chairman Han for 6 months now. Every Tuesday and Friday, without fail, he'd arrive at precisely 7:15 a.m., order a black Americano, and sit for exactly 35 minutes, never touching his phone, never acknowledging anyone beyond a curt nod when she delivered his coffee. His presence was a heavy, suffocating blanket in the usually vibrant cafe. The other customers, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, would speak in lower tones, their laughter dying on their lips. The staff moved with an almost unnatural efficiency, avoiding eye contact, desperate not to draw his attention. But today was different. Today, the weight was heavier, the fear more visceral. Because last night, a small, nondescript envelope had been slipped under her apartment door. Inside, a single grainy photograph of her younger sister Maya laughing on a park bench, and scrawled across the back in crude block letters, "Tell him, or she pays." Nia's breath hitched. Tell him what? She had no idea. The message was a chilling blank. Was it a test? A warning? Or was she merely a pawn in a game far beyond her comprehension? Her mind raced, sifting through every interaction, every fleeting glance she'd exchanged with Chairman Han. Nothing. She was just the barista, the one who remembered his order, who cleaned his table after he left. The steam wand sputtered, yanking her back to the present. The milk was perfect, velvety and smooth. She poured the dark, rich coffee into a pristine white ceramic cup, her movements precise, almost mechanical. Her hand hovered over the cup, the black marker feeling like a lead weight between her fingers. This was it, the moment of truth. The words she was compelled to write, not by a mysterious note, but by the desperate plea of a sister she knew was in danger. She had to choose them carefully. 3 words. 3 words that could either save Maya or condemn them both. She thought of Maya's bright smile, her unwavering faith in Nia, her big sister, and in that moment, a desperate, dangerous idea sparked in Nia's mind, a gamble so audacious it made her stomach clench. It was a message not from her anonymous blackmailer, but from herself, a silent scream into the void. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, Nia steadied her hand. Her eyes darted to Chairman Han, who, with his customary stillness, was gazing out of the window, his profile etched against the gray morning light. He exuded an aura of impenetrable calm, a man who saw everything, yet revealed nothing. But she knew that beneath that stoic exterior lay a mind as sharp and ruthless as a serpent's fang. With a final, resolute exhale, Nia brought the marker to the cup. 3 simple, stark words. Words that she prayed would be understood. Words that she hoped would buy them time. Words that she knew could shatter the fragile piece of the velvet grind forever. She placed the cup on the small wooden serving tray, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. This was no longer just about coffee. This was about survival. This was about Maya. How does that feel for a start? We've got the setup, the immediate threat, and a big decision for Nia. The walk from the counter to the corner table felt like a march toward a firing squad. Every step Nia took across the polished hardwood floor echoed in the sudden vacuum-like silence of the cafe. To the few early morning patrons, she was just a waitress in a crisp maid's gown delivering a morning ritual. To Nia, she was carrying a live grenade. She kept her eyes fixed on the ceramic rim. The 3 words she had scrawled, "Don't drink it," seemed to pulse with a dark light of their own. Her mind screamed at her to turn back, to dump the coffee, to run out of the back door and never look back. But she could still see the photograph of Maya in her mind's eye. If she didn't act, the people watching her sister would finish whatever they started. If she did act, the man in front of her might kill her before she could even explain. Chairman Han didn't move as she approached. He was a study in stillness, his tailored charcoal suit fitting him like armor. A faint, jagged tattoo peeked out from above his stiff white collar, a reminder that despite the refined setting, this was a man built on violence. Nia reached the table. Her hands shook, causing the white saucer to clink rhythmically against the wooden tray. Clink, clink, clink. It was the sound of a countdown. She lowered the tray. As she set the cup down, she made sure the side with the writing was facing him, positioned perfectly between his large, manicured hands. "Your Americano, Chairman," she whispered. Her voice was a ghost of itself, thin and wavering. Han didn't look up immediately. He usually waited exactly 5 seconds after the cup touched the table before acknowledging it. Nia stood frozen, her fingers clutching the empty tray against her chest like a shield. She watched his eyes. He finally shifted his gaze from the window to the cup. At first, there was nothing. Then his brow furrowed, a microscopic movement that, on a man like Han, felt like an earthquake. He didn't reach for the handle. Instead, he leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as they locked onto the black ink. The color drained from his face with terrifying speed. The healthy olive hue of his skin turned a sickly waxen gray. His hand, which had been resting calmly on the table, twitched. For a man who had survived assassinations, street wars, and federal investigations, he looked, for the first time in his life, utterly paralyzed. He didn't look at Nia. He looked through the cup, as if he could see the poison or the betrayal swirling within the dark liquid. "Who?" he breathed. The word was so low it was almost a vibration. Nia's heart was a frantic drum. I can't say here," she managed to murmur, leaning in just enough to appear like she was checking his water glass. "The eyes are everywhere, Chairman. Please, just don't." Han's gaze finally snapped up to hers. His eyes were no longer cold. They were burning with a lethal, panicked intensity. He reached out not for the cup, but for the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the wood. The silence between them was broken by the chime of the cafe door. 2 men in heavy overcoats walked in, scanning the room with clinical precision. Han's eyes flicked to them, then back to the cup, then to Nia. He knew. He knew the cup was a message, and he knew the messenger was the only thing standing between him and a very quiet, very permanent end. Slowly, Han picked up the cup. He didn't drink. He held it to his lips, letting the steam rise against his face, masking his expression from the newcomers. Beneath the porcelain, his lips moved. "The girl in the photo," he whispered, his voice steadying into a terrifying edge. "If she's hurt, this city burns. Now get me out of here without looking like you're saving my life." The air in the cafe had turned to lead. The 2 men who had just entered weren't looking for a caffeine fix. They were scanning the room with the predatory grace of sharks in shallow water. They took a table near the door, cutting off the main exit. Nia felt a bead of sweat roll down her spine, chilling her against the starched fabric of her maid's gown. Han still held the cup to his face, the steam masking his pale features. To anyone else, he looked like a man savoring the aroma. To Nia, he looked like a man counting his remaining heartbeats. "The back," Nia whispered, leaning over to unnecessarily wipe a phantom spill from the table. "Through the kitchen. There's a delivery entrance that leads to the alley behind the florist." Han's eyes darted to the men at the door. One of them was reaching into his heavy overcoat, his gaze fixed squarely on the back of Han's head. The hitman's hand moved slowly, deliberately, the universal sign of someone checking the safety on a suppressed firearm. "If I move now, they fire," Han said, his voice a jagged rasp beneath the cover of the cup. "You need to create a distraction, something loud, something that breaks their rhythm." Nia's mind raced. She was a barista, not an operative. She knew how to calibrate a grinder, not orchestrate a getaway for a Mafia kingpin. But then she saw the red arrow of the exit sign reflecting in the window, and next to it, the towering stack of metal milk canisters near the service station. "When you hear the crash, count to 3 and run," Nia said. Her voice didn't feel like hers anymore. It was cold, fueled by the primal need to keep Maya alive. She turned away from Han, her movements stiff. She walked toward the service station, her heart hammering so hard she feared it would bruise her ribs. The 2 men at the door watched her, their eyes tracking the sway of her black gown. She was the help, invisible, and yet a variable they hadn't fully accounted for. As she reached the station, she tripped. It wasn't a subtle fall. She threw her weight into the heavy metal shelving. A dozen stainless steel canisters and a tray of porcelain saucers went flying. The sound was deafening, a chaotic, high-pitched cacophony of screeching metal and shattering ceramic that echoed like a series of gunshots through the quiet cafe. Every head in the room snapped toward her. The 2 hitmen stood up instinctively, their hands diving deep into their coats, their focus momentarily pulled away from the corner table to the wreckage on the floor. 1. Nia looked up from the floor, feigning a look of absolute horror and clumsiness. 2. In the corner of her eye, she saw a gray blur. Chairman Han was no longer the stoic boss. He moved with the explosive speed of a man half his age. He vaulted over the low partition behind his table, disappearing into the shadows of the hallway, leading to the restrooms and the kitchen. 3. The taller hitman realized the mistake first. He looked at the empty table, then at the half-full cup of coffee still sitting there, the words "don't drink it" now visible to the entire room. "Where is he?" the man roared, abandoning all pretense of being a customer. He drew a matte black pistol, the silencer making it look unnaturally long. Nia scrambled to her feet, her hands covered in white ceramic dust. He went to the back. "He looks sick," she cried out, pointing toward the main restrooms, the opposite direction of the kitchen. The men didn't wait. They charged past her, their heavy boots crunching over the broken saucers. As soon as they rounded the corner toward the restrooms, Nia bolted. She didn't head for the kitchen. She headed for the front door. She needed to know if Han had made it, and more importantly, she needed to find the person who had sent that photo of Maya. She burst out onto the sidewalk, the cold morning air hitting her like a slap. A black sedan was idling at the curb, its tires screeching as it pulled away. Through the tinted rear window, she saw the silhouette of a man looking back. But as she turned to run the other way, a heavy hand clamped over her mouth, and a cold voice whispered in her ear. "You're coming with us, Barista. The chairman wants a word about your handwriting." The world became a blur of black leather and tinted glass. Nia was shoved into the back of a second vehicle, a sleek, armored SUV that smelled of expensive cologne and gun oil. She wasn't bound, but the presence of the 2 mountain-like men flanking her was more effective than any pair of handcuffs. They didn't speak. They didn't even look at her. They simply existed as walls of muscle, pinning her into the deep seat. As the SUV navigated the morning traffic with aggressive precision, Nia's mind went to the cup. "Don't drink it." She had meant it as a warning about the poison she suspected was in the beans, but now she realized she had inadvertently signed a contract with the devil. The vehicle pulled into the subterranean garage of a glass and steel monolith that pierced the city skyline, the Han Enterprises building. This wasn't a warehouse or a dark basement. This was the heart of a legitimate empire built on illegitimate foundations. They led her through a private elevator to the penthouse. When the doors slid open, Nia gasped. The room was sprawling, minimalist, and terrifyingly cold. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a godlike view of the city, but the focal point was the massive desk at the far end. Chairman Han was there. He had stripped off his charcoal jacket, his white shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with tension. A private doctor was packing away a medical kit nearby. On the desk sat a small plastic bag containing a single item, the white ceramic cup from the cafe. "Sit," Han commanded. He didn't look up from a tablet he was scrolling through. Nia sat in a chair that felt too soft, making her feel even more vulnerable. "My sister," she blurted out, her voice cracking. "I did what you asked. I got you out. Where is Maya?" Han finally looked at her. His eyes were bloodshot, the adrenaline of the escape replaced by a cold, calculating fury. He leaned forward, sliding a tablet across the desk. It showed a live feed of a playground. In the center, Maya was swinging, looking perfectly happy and unaware. A man in a suit stood near the fence watching her. "She is safe," Han said. "For now. My men reached her minutes after we left the cafe. But you, Nia, you have a very big problem." He picked up the plastic bag with the cup. "My chemist analyzed the dregs. The coffee wasn't poisoned." Nia felt the floor drop out from under her. "What?" "But the note. The people who sent the photo said—" "The note was a feint," Han interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous low. "They didn't want to poison me. They wanted to see if I had a leak in my inner circle. They wanted to see who I would trust when my life was on the line. By writing those words, you identified yourself as someone I listened to. You didn't save me from a toxin, you saved me from a hitman's bullet. Yes, but you also outed yourself as my greatest weakness." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out over his kingdom. "The men who came for me are part of the Iron Fang, a splinter cell of my own organization. They used you to flush me out, and now they know that a simple barista in a maid's gown is the only person who can get close enough to Chairman Han to make him turn his back." Nia shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. "I just wanted to save my sister. I'm not a part of this." "You are now," Han said, turning around. The faint tattoo on his neck seemed to pulse. "They will come for you again to get to me. And the only way to keep your sister breathing is for you to stay exactly where I can see you." He gestured to a door at the side of the room. "That is your new quarters. You will be dressed, fed, and protected, but you will never leave this building without my express permission." Nia looked at the door, then back at the powerful man who had turned her life into a thriller. She was no longer a barista. She was a high-stakes prisoner in a gilded cage. "And if I refuse?" she asked defiantly. Han smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Then we see if the Iron Fang is as patient with Maya as I am." The quarters Han provided weren't to sell. They were a masterpiece of cold modern luxury. The suite was draped in shades of cream and slate, with a bed so large it felt like an island. But the beauty was a lie. The windows didn't open. The door had no handle on the inside. Nia paced the length of the silk rug, her maid's gown, now wrinkled and stained with coffee dust, feeling like a costume from a past life. She had been in the room for 5 hours when the door finally hummed open. A woman entered, dressed in a sharp, tailored suit. She carried a garment bag and a tablet. "I am Min," the woman said, her voice like clicking glass. "I am the chairman's chief of staff. You will change. The gown is distracting." "I want to see my sister," Nia demanded, standing her ground. Min didn't blink. "You saw the feed. She is at her piano lesson now. She thinks you are working an extra shift for a big promotion. Keep it that way." She laid the garment bag on the bed. "The chairman requires your presence for dinner, 8 o'clock. Do not be late." As Min left, Nia felt a surge of desperate energy. She couldn't just sit here and wait to be a pawn. She began to examine the room, looking for anything: a loose vent, a communication line, a flaw in the fortress. She moved to the desk, a heavy slab of black marble. Hidden underneath the lip of the desk, her fingers brushed against something tactile. Not a wire, but a piece of paper. She peeled it away. It was a small, translucent slip, the kind used for high-end architectural overlays. On it were handwritten notes in a language she didn't recognize, but interspersed were names she knew. The Velvet Grind, Maya, 7:15 a.m., and at the bottom a sequence of numbers, 02-03-26. Nia's breath hitched. That was today's date. But there was more. Below the date was a small hand-drawn symbol, a fang pierced by a needle. The Iron Fang. Someone had been in this room before her. Someone who was tracking her, Maya, and the chairman's coffee schedule from inside Han's own penthouse. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Han wasn't just fighting a splinter cell, he was housing a traitor in his inner sanctum. She heard a faint, muffled sound from the wall behind the desk. She pressed her ear to the cold stone. At first, there was only the hum of the building's climate control, but then, voices. The barista was an unplanned variable, a man's voice whispered. It was deep, cultured, and chillingly familiar. "But she serves a purpose. Han is emotional now. He's compromised. We move during the gala tonight." "And the girl," another voice asked. "The girl is the insurance policy. If Han doesn't sign over the shipping manifests, we send him her heart in a velvet box." Nia scrambled back, her hands over her mouth to stifle a scream. The voice, the first one, It belonged to Min's second-in-command, the man who had escorted Nia into the building. She looked at the garment bag on the bed. Inside was a stunning, deep red evening dress. It wasn't just a change of clothes, it was a uniform for the gala. Han wanted her there as a shield, but the Iron Fang wanted her there as a trigger. She looked at the slip of paper again. If she told Han, would he believe her? Or would he think she was part of the play? He was a man who lived by the rule of shadow, and she was still just the girl from the coffee shop. But she remembered the look on his face when he saw the words on the cup. He had gone pale because he was afraid, not of death, but of being seen. She had broken his mask once. She had to do it again. Nia grabbed the marker she had tucked into her pocket from the cafe, the same one she'd used to save his life. She didn't have a cup this time. She looked at the red dress. 8 o'clock, she whispered to the empty room, her eyes hardening. I'll be there. The penthouse ballroom was a shimmering ocean of silk, diamonds, and dangerous men. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across the faces of the city's elite. Politicians rubbing elbows with smugglers, all under the pretense of a charity gala for urban renewal. Nia felt like a splash of blood in her deep red dress. The silk clung to her, a stark contrast to the stiff maid's gown she had worn only hours ago. Her hair was swept up, exposing the pulse point in her neck that wouldn't stop throbbing. Beside her, Chairman Han was a statue in a midnight blue tuxedo. He held her arm with a grip that felt less like a gentleman's escort and more like a predator's claim. Smile, Nia, Han murmured, his lips barely moving as he nodded to a passing senator. You are my guest of honor. If you look terrified, they will know I have a reason to be. They already know, Nia whispered back, her eyes scanning the room. She spotted Min across the floor, her sharp eyes tracking every movement. Somewhere nearby was the traitor she had overheard. Han, the Iron Fang. They aren't just outside. They're in your house. Han's grip tightened almost to the point of pain. I know. Why do you think I brought you here? In the cafe, you were a warning. Here, you are the bait. Nia's blood ran cold. He wasn't protecting her. He was using her to flush out the traitors. A waiter approached with a tray of champagne flutes. Nia's heart skipped. This was the moment. The Iron Fang symbol she had seen, the fang pierced by a needle, wasn't just a drawing. It was a method. The waiter was the man from the SUV, the one whose voice she had heard through the wall. As he leaned in to offer the tray, Nia didn't reach for a glass. She reached for Han's hand, lacing her fingers with his. It was an intimate gesture that forced the waiter to pause. Chairman, the waiter said, his voice smooth. A vintage for the occasion. Han reached for a glass, his eyes locked on the waiter's. Just as his fingers touched the crystal, Nia stumbled. She threw her weight against Han, sending the tray tilting. 3 glasses shattered on the marble floor with a sound like gunfire. The room went silent. Han looked down at the mess, then at Nia. Clumsy, Min hissed, appearing from the shadows. Clean this up immediately. But Nia wasn't looking at Min. She was looking at the shattered glass. Amidst the golden champagne, a small silver needle glinted on the floor, having fallen from the base of one of the broken flutes. It was coated in a faint, translucent film. Han saw it. His face didn't go pale this time. It went dark with a murderous clarity. Min, Han said, his voice a low, terrifying rumble that carried across the hushed ballroom. My guest seems to have found something of yours. The waiter didn't hesitate. He dropped the tray and reached into his jacket. But Han was faster. He didn't pull a gun. He pulled Nia behind him and drove a heavy silver cane into the waiter's solar plexus. Panic erupted. The elite guests scrambled for the exits as men in suits pulled weapons from under their formal wear. The gala had transformed into a war zone in seconds. The elevators are locked, someone screamed. Han grabbed Nia by the waist, pulling her toward the grand balcony. The service stairs, he commanded. Min, clear a path. But Min didn't move. She stood among the shattered glass, her face a mask of cold indifference. She held a small detonator in her hand. The path is closed, Chairman, Min said. The Iron Fang doesn't want your shipping manifests anymore. They want your seat. And they've already moved on the girl. Han froze. The tablet in his pocket chirped, a high-pitched alert. He pulled it out. The feed of Maya's piano lesson was gone. In its place was a static-filled image of an empty room and a single black coffee cup sitting on the piano bench. Nia let out a strangled sob. Maya. You have 10 minutes to sign the digital transfer, Min said, her voice echoing in the emptying hall. Or the girl is the first to taste the needle. Nia looked at Han. The man who had seemed invincible was finally trembling. He looked at the tablet, then at Nia, then at the gun-wielding men closing in. I'll sign it, Han whispered. No, Nia said, stepping forward. She reached into her clutch and pulled out the marker she had stolen from the cafe. She didn't have paper. She grabbed Han's white tuxedo cuff and wrote 3 new words in jagged, bold ink. They're at Nana's. Han stared at the words. His eyes widened. He looked at Nia, a silent question in his gaze. Nia nodded fervently. She had seen a detail in the background of the empty piano room on the tablet, a small crocheted doily that belonged to their grandmother, a place Maya only went when she was scared. The kidnappers hadn't taken Maya to a safe house. They had taken her to the one place they thought Han wouldn't look. Min, Han said, his voice regaining its steel as he looked up. You should have checked her family tree more carefully. The ghost of the South Side. The roar of the engine was the only sound inside the modified black sedan as it tore through the rain-slicked streets of the city's industrial fringe. Han was behind the wheel, his knuckles white against the leather. He had abandoned the tuxedo jacket. His white shirt was stained with the ink of Nia's message and the dust of the gala's chaos. Nia sat in the passenger seat, clutching her silk skirts. If we bring the whole syndicate, they'll kill her before we hit the porch, she said, her voice trembling but certain. Min thinks you're heading to the docks to sign the transfer. She doesn't know I recognize the lace. I sent a ghost team to the docks as a distraction, Han rasped, weaving through a narrow alleyway. But it's just us for the breach. Can you handle a weapon? I can handle a steam wand and a heavy tamper, Nia replied, her eyes flashing. Just get me to my sister. They reached the neighborhood where Nia had grown up, a place of narrow row houses and sagging porches. It was a world away from the glass towers of Han Enterprises. Nana's house sat at the end of a dead-end street, its yellow paint peeling like sunburnt skin. Han killed the lights and rolled to a stop 2 houses away. The silence that followed was suffocating. One light was on in the upstairs window, Maya's old bedroom. 2 guards at the front, likely more in the kitchen, Han whispered, checking a compact submachine gun. He handed Nia a heavy, blunt, tactical flashlight. This isn't just a light. Aim for the eyes and swing for the temple. Stay behind me. They moved through the shadows of the overgrown hydrangeas. The rain muffled their footsteps. As they reached the porch, the front door creaked open. A man in a leather jacket stepped out to light a cigarette. Before the flame touched the tobacco, Han was on him. It was a blur of brutal efficiency, a hand over the mouth, a sharp strike to the throat, and the guard went down without a sound. Han caught him before he hit the floorboards, dragging him into the shadows. Nia felt a coldness settle over her. This was the man the city feared, and for the first time she was grateful for his darkness. They slipped inside. The house smelled of lavender and old books, the smell of Nia's childhood, now tainted by the scent of cheap takeout and gun oil. From the kitchen, she heard the low murmur of voices and the clink of glass. 3 in the back. Han signaled with his fingers. He pointed toward the stairs. Go. Get the girl. I'll hold the floor. Nia didn't hesitate. She crept up the stairs, the wood groaning under her weight. Every creak felt like a gunshot. She reached the landing and saw a shadow stretching out from under Maya's door. A guard was leaning against the frame, scrolling through his phone. She didn't have a gun. She didn't have Han's training. But she had a lifetime of rage condensed into a single moment. She clicked the tactical light to its highest strobe setting and lunged. The blinding, flickering light hit the guard's eyes, disorienting him instantly. He cried out, reaching for his holster, but Nia swung the heavy metal casing with everything she had. Crack! The light connected with his jaw, and he slumped against the door. She burst into the room. Maya! The girl was huddled on the bed, her eyes wide with terror, her hands bound with zip ties. When she saw Nia, a sob broke from her throat. Nia, they said you were hurt. I'm fine, baby. I'm here, Nia whispered, frantically searching for something to cut the ties. She found a pair of sewing scissors on Nana's vanity. Below them, the house erupted. The muffled thwip-thwip of suppressed gunfire was followed by the heavy thud of bodies hitting the floor. Then, silence. Nia froze, holding Maya close. The silence lasted an eternity. Was it Han, or was it the Iron Fang? The construction accident was a lie to protect you, Han whispered. She gave you a life of coffee beans and quiet mornings because she knew the smell of gunpowder would never leave me. Nia felt a wave of nausea. Her entire identity, the struggling barista, the protective older sister, was built on a foundation of protective silence. Maya isn't... She looked down at the girl. Maya is my sister, Nia said fiercely, pulling the girl closer. Whatever blood is in my veins, she is mine. And she has nothing to do with your wars. She has everything to do with them now, Han said, his face hardening as the shock began to recede, replaced by a cold, paternal rage. Min didn't just pick a random barista. She didn't just find a weakness. She found the inheritance. She knows who you are, Nia, probably better than you knew yourself. A sudden sharp whistle sounded from the street. One of Han's ghosts was signaling. We have to move, Han said, his professional veneer snapping back into place. Min will realize the trap at the docks failed. She'll send the heavy hitters here. This house is a coffin now. He reached for Maya, but Nia stepped in front of her, the sewing scissors still gripped in her hand. Don't touch her. Han stopped. He looked at the scissors, then at his daughter. A wry, painful smile touched his lips. You really are mine, aren't you? Fine. You lead her. But follow my shadows. They descended the stairs, passing the wreckage of the kitchen. The three men of the Iron Fang were sprawled across Nana's linoleum, their blood mixing with the spilled milk from an overturned carton. It was a gruesome reminder of the world Nia had just been birthed into. As they reached the porch, the night exploded. A high-caliber round shattered the wooden pillar inches from Nia's head. Han tackled them both off the porch into the dirt, just as a second shot tore through the front door. Sniper! Han yelled, pinning them behind the rusted remains of Nana's old sedan. Across the street, 3 stories up, roof of the warehouse. We're pinned, Nia gasped, the dirt gritting between her teeth. Han, the car is a sitting duck. I don't need the car, Han said, pulling a heavy radio from his belt. I need the family business. He keyed the mic. This is Dragon 1, code black. The target is the warehouse on 4th. Level it. Han, no! Nia cried out. There are families in this neighborhood. Not in that warehouse, Han growled. Seconds later, a low-flying drone hissed through the rainy sky. A muffled thump was followed by a bloom of orange fire that lit up the entire block. The warehouse roof collapsed in a shower of brick and dust. The sniper fire ceased. In the sudden ringing silence, Han stood up, offering a hand to Nia. Welcome to the family, Nia, he said, his voice void of warmth. Now, let's go kill the woman who tried to take my daughters. The safe house was a concrete bunker disguised as a high-end art gallery in the city's North District. Inside, the air was scrubbed clean by industrial filters, but Nia could still smell the smoke from the warehouse on her skin. Maya had finally cried herself into a fitful sleep on a leather sofa, draped in a cashmere throw that cost more than Nia made in a year at the cafe. Han stood at a wall of monitors, his back to Nia. The monitors flickered with grainy security footage from across the city. The Black Serpent Syndicate was in chaos. Min has moved faster than I anticipated, Han said without turning. She's seized the central counting house and flipped the captains of the West Side. She's telling them I've gone soft, that I'm compromising the Empire for a waitress. Nia walked up to him, her steps silent on the polished concrete. She looked at her own reflection in the dark monitors. The red dress was torn at the hem, and her face was streaked with soot. She didn't look like a barista anymore. She looked like a survivor. You're a ghost to them, Han, Nia said, her voice steady. They think you're hiding. In their world, hiding is losing. Han turned, his eyes narrowing. And what do you suggest? I go out there and show them I'm still the monster they feared. No, Nia said, a cold plan forming in her mind. You show them you're the man who sees everything, even the things they write in the dark. She grabbed a black marker from a tray of architectural pens. She walked to the glass wall of the gallery, which overlooked the rain-drenched street. In large, bold strokes, she began to write directly onto the glass. The velvet grind, 4 a.m. Han watched her, his expression unreadable. That's my shop. It's compromised. Min's men are likely camping there now. Exactly, Nia said, turning back to him. Min is a perfectionist. She thinks she won because she took your weakness. She thinks the story ends with you begging for Maya's life. She's waiting for a phone call, a signature. Give her a confrontation instead. Nia leaned in, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. The cafe has a pressurized gas system for the nitrogen-infused cold brew. The tanks are in the basement, directly beneath the main floor. If we bypass the regulators... Han's eyebrows rose. A slow, predatory grin spread across his face. The first genuine smile Nia had seen from him. It wasn't the smile of a father. It was the smile of a general who had just found a secret weapon. "You want to turn your place of work into a vacuum bomb," Han said. "I want to show her that a barista knows her equipment better than a hitman knows his gun," Nia replied. Han stepped toward her, placing a heavy hand on her shoulder. The weight of it felt different now. Less like a threat, more like a passing of the torch. "Min will bring her best. She'll expect an army. She won't expect a chemistry lesson." He keyed his radio. "Dragon 1 to all remaining loyalist units. We are not going to the docks. We are going home. Secure the perimeter of the Velvet Grind, but do not engage. Let them in. Let them all in." As the sun began to hint at a gray, miserable dawn, the counterstrike began. They left Maya under the protection of Han's most trusted ghosts and headed back to where it all started. The cafe looked different in the pre-dawn shadows. The windows were dark, but Nia could see the subtle glint of optics in the second-story loft. Min was there. She had taken Nia's sanctuary and turned it into a kill zone. Han checked his watch. 3:55 a.m. "Are you sure about this, Nia? Once we step inside, there is no just a barista anymore. You'll be the daughter of the dragon. You'll be hunted for the rest of your life." Nia looked at the shop where she had spent years pouring heart and soul into every cup. She thought of Maya's safety and Nana's ruined house. "I already wrote the words on the cup, Han," she said, checking the tactical wrench she had tucked into her belt. "It's too late for a refund." They moved toward the back entrance, two shadows merging into the dark, ready to burn the Empire down to save the family. The air inside the Velvet Grind was stagnant, smelling of cold beans and the metallic tang of oiled weapons. Nia led Han through the service entrance, her feet moving instinctively over the creaky floorboards she had navigated for years. They were in the basement now, a cramped space filled with burlap sacks of coffee and the sprawling network of pipes that fed the high-tech taps upstairs. "The nitrogen tanks," Nia whispered, pointing to the three towering steel cylinders in the corner. "They're high pressure. If I open the primary valves and block the safety vents, the gas will flood the vents and the floorboards above. One spark, one localized heat source, and the pressure differential will do the rest. It won't be a fire, it'll be a structural collapse." Han watched her work. Her fingers, once used to delicate latte art, now twisted heavy iron wrenches with a frantic, desperate strength. He stood guard at the base of the stairs, his submachine gun aimed at the ceiling. Above them, he could hear the muffled footsteps of Min's vanguard. "They're directly above the espresso station," Han signaled. Nia tightened the last bolt, bypassing the regulator. A low, ominous hiss began to fill the room, the sound of the nitrogen-infused cold brew system being pushed to its breaking point. "It'll take 5 minutes to reach critical saturation. We need to be on the main floor to trigger it, or we'll be buried in the cellar." They ascended the narrow stairs, emerging into the darkened kitchen. The cafe was a skeleton of its former self. Tables were overturned, and the expensive porcelain lay shattered. Min sat at the center table. Han's table, bathed in the pale light of a single tactical lamp. "You're late, Chairman," Min said, her voice echoing off the walls. She wasn't alone. 4 men stood in the shadows, their rifles trained on the doorway. "And you brought the help. How sentimental." Han stepped into the light, leaving Nia in the shadow of the industrial refrigerator. "The help has a name, Min, and she has a better grasp of the overhead costs of this building than you do." Min laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "I don't care about the building, Han. I care about the signature. The Iron Fang is tired of waiting for you to die of old age. Sign the digital transfer of the shipping routes, and I'll let the girl, both of them, walk out of here." "I'm not signing anything," Han said, his voice dropping to that terrifying low rumble. "I'm here to settle the bill." Nia reached behind the counter, her hand finding the emergency shutoff for the main electrical grid. She looked at Han. He gave a microscopic nod. Click. The cafe plunged into absolute darkness. "Kill them!" Min screamed. Muzzle flashes strobed through the room, the deafening cracks of gunfire shattering the remaining windows. But Han and Nia weren't where they had been standing. Nia scrambled along the floor behind the fortified mahogany bar, her hand reaching for the nitrogen tap handle, the one labeled Nitro Cold Brew. She didn't pull it to pour a drink. She ripped the handle backward, shearing the internal seal. A massive plume of pressurized gas erupted from the tap with the force of a jet engine. The sudden drop in the temperature turned the air into a thick, white fog, blinding the gunman. The nitrogen hissed into the room, displacing the oxygen, making the hitman gasp and stagger. "Han! Now!" Nia shouted, covering her ears. Han didn't fire his gun. He grabbed a heavy, decorative brass carafe from the shelf and hurled it with all his might into the main electrical transformer box behind the espresso machine. The resulting arc of blue electricity met the pressurized gas and the volatile cleaning chemicals Nia had intentionally spilled across the floor. The explosion wasn't a roar. It was a sudden, violent thump that felt like the world being punched by a giant. The floorboards beneath Min's feet disintegrated. The pressure wave blew the front windows outward, showering the street in glass. Nia felt herself being lifted and thrown. She hit the back wall, the breath leaving her lungs in a painful rush. As the dust and white nitrogen fog began to settle, she saw the main floor had partially collapsed into the basement. Min was screaming, pinned beneath the heavy mahogany counter. Her men were scattered, unconscious, or broken. Han emerged from the wreckage, his tuxedo shirt shredded, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. He walked toward Min, his footsteps heavy and final. He didn't look at his fallen chief of staff with hatred, only with the cold indifference of a man who had finally cleared his ledgers. He reached down and picked up a single unbroken white cup that had somehow survived the blast. He looked at Nia, who was shaking as she pulled herself up from the floor. "3 words, Nia," Han said, handing her the cup. "Write them for her, before she goes." Nia took the cup. Her hand was steady now. She looked at the woman who had tried to kill her sister, the woman who had betrayed the man who turned out to be her father. She wrote the words in thick, black ink and set the cup on the debris in front of Min's face. Min looked at the cup, her eyes widening in a final pathetic terror. The words were, "Forget my name." The sirens were a distant wail, a chorus of mechanical mourning approaching the wreckage of the Velvet Grind. Smoke, thick and smelling of charred Arabica beans and ozone, curled into the pre-dawn sky. The explosion had gutted the interior, leaving the upscale cafe, a hollowed-out ribcage of blackened timber and twisted metal. Han stood on the sidewalk, the flickering blue and red lights of the first responding patrol car dancing across his weary face. He looked older. The revelation of his lineage and the adrenaline of the betrayal had stripped away the invincibility he usually wore, like a second skin. Nia stood beside him, her hand gripping the sleeve of his tattered shirt. She was covered in gray soot, looking like a ghost risen from the ash. Behind them, the ghosts of Han's loyalists were melting back into the shadows, carrying away the wounded and the evidence of the Syndicate's internal war. Min had been taken, not to a hospital, but to a place where the Black Serpent dealt with its deepest traitors. "It's over," Nia whispered, though it felt more like a question. "For Min, yes," Han replied, his voice a dry rasp. "But for the city, this was a declaration of war. The other families, the Italians, the Russians, they've seen the dragon bleed. They'll mistake it for weakness." "Is it?" Nia asked, turning to face him. "Weakness, or is it just the truth finally coming out?" Han turned his gaze to her. For the first time, he didn't look at her as a barista or a pawn. He looked at her with a terrifying sort of pride. "The truth is a luxury we can no longer afford. You handled that nitrogen like a seasoned demolitionist, Nia. Your mother, she would have hated that I taught you that. Even indirectly. She didn't teach me to be a victim, Han. She taught me to survive. I just didn't know I'd be surviving this." A black SUV pulled up to the curb, the tires crunching over the shattered glass. The door opened, and Maya tumbled out, breaking past the guards. She ran to Nia, burying her face in her sister's soot-stained dress. "Nia, you're hurt," Maya sobbed, her small hands checking Nia's face for injuries. "I'm okay, Maya. I'm okay," Nia soothed, stroking the girl's hair. She looked at Han over Maya's head. The question hung in the air. What now? They couldn't go back to their apartment. Nana's house was a crime scene. The life of a quiet barista was a pile of ash inside the building behind them. "I have a villa in Jeju," Han said, his voice regaining its command. "It's a fortress. No one knows the connection. You and the girl go there. I'll send my best security. You'll have everything. Teachers for Maya, a life without fear. And you? Nia asked. I have a nest of serpents to clean out, Han said, his eyes darkening. If I join you now, the scent of blood will follow us. I have to finish this so you can start something new. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy, ornate key, not to a house, but to a safety deposit box. He pressed it into Nia's hand. In that box is everything Sarah left for you, the real birth certificate, the photos, and enough capital to buy every coffee shop in this city 10 times over. Nia looked at the key, then at the burning remains of her sanctuary. I don't want to buy coffee shops, Han. I want a life where I don't have to write warnings on cups. Then go, Han said, stepping back into the shadows of the SUV. The plane is waiting at the private terminal. Take the girl. Don't look back. As the SUV pulled away, Nia watched Han stand alone in front of the ruins. He looked like a king of a graveyard. She looked down at the key in her palm and then at Maya, who was watching the fire with wide, haunted eyes. Nia realized then that the 3 words she had written for Min were also for herself. Forget my name. She had to forget Nia the barista. She had to become someone else, someone capable of protecting the only family she had left in a world that now knew her blood. But as they reached the airport, a vibration came from Nia's pocket. It was her old phone. The screen cracked. A single text message from an unknown number appeared. The cup was just the beginning. See you in Jeju, princess. Nia's heart stopped. The Iron Fang hadn't been decapitated. It had just been pruned. The island of Jeju was a paradise of volcanic stone and emerald waves, a world away from the soot-choked alleys of the city. The villa was a fortress of glass and cedar perched on a cliffside, surrounded by guards who moved like shadows among the camellia trees. To Maya, it was a vacation. To Nia, it was a gilded bunker. The text message lived in her mind like a parasite. See you in Jeju, princess. It had been 3 weeks since the explosion at the Velvet Grind. Han was still on the mainland, conducting a bloody purge of the syndicate that made the evening news every night under the guise of corporate restructuring. He called Nia once a day. He never spoke of love, only of security protocols and shipping manifests. He was building a wall of bodies between his past and his daughters. Nia sat on the wide balcony, the salt spray of the Pacific misting her face. On the table before her sat a single white ceramic cup, one she had brought from the wreckage. Beside it was the heavy key Han had given her. Nia, are you coming to see the horses? Maya called out from the garden, her laughter finally sounding light again. In a minute, Maya, Nia shouted back, her voice forced. She turned her attention back to the safety deposit box she had opened that morning. Inside wasn't just money. There were letters from her mother, Sarah. As Nia read them, the truth of her life became a tapestry of sacrifice. Sarah hadn't just run away. She had negotiated Nia's freedom with the syndicate's rivals, using Han's own secrets as leverage. Nia wasn't just a daughter, she was a living insurance policy. A soft footfall on the cedar deck made Nia's hand instinctively fly to the small, concealed pistol Han's head of security had taught her to use. Relax, Nia, it's just the tea, a voice said. It was a young woman, a local server hired to help with the villa. She set a tray down, her eyes fixed on the ceramic cup Nia had brought from the city. That's a beautiful cup, the server said, her voice smooth and devoid of the local accent. But it looks used. Nia's eyes narrowed. She looked at the woman's hands. They were calloused, not from service, but from the repetitive grip of a tactical weapon. And there, tucked just behind her ear, was a small, faded tattoo, a fang. The parasite in Nia's mind stopped biting and started to sting. They were already here. The coffee in this house is terrible, Nia said, her voice dropping into a cold, practiced calm. I prefer to make my own. Is that so? The woman smiled, reaching for the teapot. I heard you were an artist with the brew, a regular legend. Nia stood up slowly. She didn't reach for her gun. She reached for the teapot. Let me show you a trick I learned at the grind. It's about the temperature. As the woman leaned in, Nia didn't pour the tea. She gripped the heavy ceramic cup and slammed it down onto the table, shattering it. She picked up a jagged shard of the porcelain, the piece that still bore the faded ink of the word drink. The Iron Fang sent a waitress to finish a barista's job. Nia whispered. The shard held inches from the woman's throat. That's a mistake in branding. The woman's smile vanished. You think you're safe because your father is killing everyone on the mainland. The Fang is a hydra, Nia. We have heads in every port. You belong to us. I don't belong to anyone, Nia said. She pressed the shard closer, drawing a thin line of red. Tell your people this. My father is a monster, but I'm the one who knows how to burn the house down with the gas turned on. If you ever come near Maya again, I won't write words on a cup. I'll write them on your tombstone. Nia shoved the woman back. Two of Han's ghosts appeared from the camellias, their weapons drawn. They had been waiting for Nia's signal. As they dragged the intruder away, Nia stood alone on the balcony. She looked at the broken pieces of the cup on the table. The life of the girl who made lattes was officially over. The princess was dead. She picked up her phone and dialed the one number she had sworn never to call. Han? She said, when the line clicked open. Nia, is everything? I'm done hiding, she interrupted. Send the jet. I'm coming back to the city, but I'm not coming back as your daughter. Then how are you coming back? Han asked, a hint of awe in his voice. Nia looked out at the vast, dark ocean, her reflection in the glass showing a woman with cold eyes and a steady hand. She picked up the marker from the table and wrote 3 final words on the white cedar railing of the villa. As the boss. I'm coming back to take over the shop, Nia said. All of them. She hung up the phone. The story that began with a warning on a coffee cup was ending with a queen taking her throne.